Taxes are the only certainty. Will 20% of people of society? And I have made it on my own in this world. Will not take care of time around a 2-year-old. I'm gonna stop the old nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna stop the old nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna stop the old nation with the self-preservation. Well, let me talk a bit about the weather. You must admit it's not very clever. Don't get me wrong, it's not an anti-British song. Well, there is nowhere I would rather be wrong. I'm gonna stop the old nation and do my own thing, and I will be king. I'm gonna stop the old nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna stop the old nation with the self-preservation. There are just a few things that I would like to say about the UK and how I think it has gone astray. Don't get me wrong, it ain't all bad. I love the crazy fads, like England always buggering up, but you know we're gonna win the World Cup. I'm gonna stop the old nation with the self-preservation. I'm gonna stop the old nation with the self-preservation.
Keep the red flag flying here.
Hello and good evening. I haven't been able to watch the news for the last 2 days. It's just been too distressing to watch. And so you can't have a minute silent on radio, can you? Everybody just turns off. But I do think that we need to mark the beginning of this program by just having a moment to contemplate the utter horror of what's happening to civilians on both sides of the conflict, both the civilians who died in Israel and the Palestinian civilians who are just being targeted in Gaza at the moment. The whole thing is just horrific. And we'll be discussing that first. But first of all, I've got to welcome Kat. Hello, Kat. It's so lovely to have you back.
Good evening.
Sort of and then Paul, you're back after a long. Is your moment of the week what we were talking about before the show started?
Related, I guess. I suppose, yeah, a little bit related to it.
We're in the presence of a superstar. We're in the presence of an international cycling star. That's basically what it's about. He may not get to mention it, but there we go. And then Kerry, thank you so much. Welcome back again. Yeah, just so you're a lot more important you are than you ever crack on. It's an honour to have you on the show. Thank you very much.
John, you're the only man who stops me swearing.
Let's move on. Moment of the week, I think. Let's start. Paul, international cycling star. What's your moment of the week?
I guess the moment of the week for me will have been everything seems to get a little bit political. So when we I've recently been riding the World Track Masters Championships. So this is the cycling track. This is like the velodrome. So it was at Manchester Velodrome this year. So I was like racing in my age category for the 40 to 44-year-olds. And they had people from all over the world racing there, and at one point you may or may not know who this is, but Sylvan Evans turned up, and he's an Israeli billionaire, who kind of has been accused of sports washing by having an Israel Premier Tech cycling team. It's a top tier cycling team, so there's a few of them. There's UAE, Emirates, there's Bahrain Victorious, and there's Israel Premier Tech, the like nation states that have cycling teams to try and look like they are all good and show themselves in a positive light. He turned up. He wasn't on the start list. Must have somehow got himself onto the start list. Maybe, I don't know how he managed to do that. And like, you know, so Israel flags started appearing in the building and things, and it was just kind of interesting to see. Like, there was a lot of money there anyway by a lot of teams. There was a team there that had spent £250,000 on equipment and things, and we were kind of scrapping things together and beg, stealing and borrowing our equipment. But you know, yeah, so everything's a bit political, isn't it?
Well, yes, but you showed them good.
I showed them all by finishing at best 10th.
Yes. I always say when they say, "Oh, a poor showing for the British runner there," so he's the fourth fastest runner in the world. What more do you want? You know, they sort of, for goodness sake, 10th in the world, Paul. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I was really pleased with it, to be honest. I didn't go in with any expectations. A year ago, I wasn't even training, so I was
well done
training, but not cycling training. So yeah, it's pretty
unbelievable
rapid progress.
Kerry, your moment of the week.
Well, it's got to be Starmer getting glittered all over today at that Labour Party conference. But I've literally been, when I was waiting for my computer to log in, I've been on Twitter and they reckon it's a setup. They reckon it's a setup how anyone can get that close to Keir Starmer on the stage at Labour Party conference. I mean, I've been at the Brighton one. It's like, wow, it's worse to get into the Labour Party conference than it is Parliament. And I think that it has been a bit of a setup for him because, like, previous years, like, you know, my interest in the Labour Party, previous years, there's been a bit of a juicy, like, snippet of someone kicking off on the stage or whatever. And there's been none of that. It's just been mundane, like AI kind of thing, like robots. I mean, Rachel Reeves was like an AI figure, wasn't she, giving her speech? Is it AI or AL or whatever you call it? I'm not very clued up. But yeah, I think that it was a bit of a setup. The way it was his facial expressions. He didn't actually react to it. It was as though he knew it was coming. And he was a bit like that. That's about it. And then like a woman come on and got him off the stage. And I don't know, but it made me smile seeing him getting glittered on. I tell you that. It might give him a bit more personality.
If it was really deserved it, sort of, if it was, so there's a thing going round about supposedly caught him swearing at one
That's
of these.
fake.
Is it fake? Yes, they're
My
saying.
well, my sister MP Simon Clark in MSEC even posted saying don't take on Twitter, well X, sorry, posted saying don't take any notice of that clip of Keir Starmer, and I thought it must be fake if he's posting it.
I mean, the thing is that you just can't, you just can't believe anything you see anymore. And that's AI for you. These deep fakes.
Was it AI? So I don't call it Al, it's AI.
It's artificial intelligence, AI. Al, there's a song by you can call
You know
me.
me, John. I wait.
Maybe you just got it wrong. Maybe it was the AI. And finally, Kat, moment of your week, Kat.
Oh, mine's very boring. Mine is meeting my friends for coffee and not talking about everything everyone else has talked about. So, me and my other half met our friend Andy for coffee today. He talked about his dad turning in his grave with the leader of a Labour Party having the word "sir" in front of the name. And we ordered our coffees and we talked about the workers' rights in that coffee shop and we chewed the cuds and we thought they were all a bunch of dicks. And that's about where we left the conversation. All three of us from different backgrounds in life, all three of us genuine friends. I've paid very little to zero attention to the Tory conference and to the Labour Party conference. But the kind of conversations you have in a coffee shop with your friends matters.
Yes. And what I find, Kat, is that when you talk to people out there, there's an amazing amount of agreement about what's wrong and what ought to happen.
Absolutely.
There's this amazing disconnect between the establishment and those who have power and everybody else. And you talk to very right-wing people. And in fact, there's massive agreement about what's wrong and what needs to happen. It's crazy.
Yeah, and for the record, that coffee was had in Uxbridge, which is a little bit of an interesting place to have a coffee with, which is where the Tories just won a local election where they weren't expected to, in which ULEZ is a massive issue and in which the Labour-Tory argument is a massive issue.
Looking at the chat, Jed Hillary has joined us. Jed Hillary is a colleague from Setchfield way back. Welcome, Jed. Everybody's congratulating Paul, but Jane Strange, I think I agree with Kat. It's difficult to be interested in what such dishonest people are saying, but they're not saying anything. The politicians sort of studiedly don't say anything. Jacqueline Hemmings watched some of the Tory conference, but she hasn't watched anything to do with the Labour conference. You haven't missed out. Okay, let's go.
Now it's time for the big story.
And our first story is the Gaza war. And the first person to speak is going to be Paul. I always give people a look at the questions I'm going to ask them so that they're not completely stumped. I don't give them it up front so they can have weeks to prepare, but I give them a glance before the show. And the first question is, briefly tell us what is going on. Paul's comment when he saw that was, I can tell you, but it won't be brief. So, Paul, tell us what's going on.
So the reason that it can't be brief is that what I think people want us to think is that recently Hamas attacked some civilian targets within Israel, kidnapped some people, and that's where it starts. And that is the impression that the general public would have, and that is why we're paying attention to this right now. But the real issue has gone on since 1947, so when the Western powers decided that there should be a Jewish homeland called Israel on the site of Palestine, historic Palestine. There have always been a mixture of, like, so always, for a very, very long time, a mixture of Jewish people who live there, Muslim people who live there, Christian people who live there, because it is the holy land of all of those three religions. If you look at that area of the world, it's biblical times, all those amazing holy sites that are sacred in all those religions are there. This is, and there've been the Crusades and all these awful things that have happened there over that. But since 1947, Israel has existed and has increasingly taken more and more land. So when it was drawn up, Israel was a certain part of that land, and then over time Israel have taken more and more of that land, till now you have an awful situation where you have a people who are in what has been described as the largest open air prison in the world. The people of Gaza and of the West Bank are hemmed in on all sides by Israel. They are often treated as subhumans. There are routinely attacks. They are treated as second-class citizens if Muslims want to live in Israel. You have the UN have declared Israel an apartheid state. Amnesty International have done the same. But over the last few years, what we've seen is any reaction to that has been greeted with derision, and there has been fewer and fewer ways to protest. So there's something called the BDS movement, so that would be to boycott Israeli goods. So anything that's made in Israel or people who support in Israel, you could choose as an individual, actually, I'm not going to buy that stuff because I believe Israel's an apartheid state, similar to what individual people did in South Africa. And speaking of South Africa as well, you've got like people like Desmond Tutu who said Israel's state is worse than they put up with in South African apartheid. But anyway, so we've got this thing, and I think last year in Parliament it was declared illegal for companies to refuse to buy Israeli goods. Now,
councils and charities.
Yeah, councils, and you've got this situation where countries are hugely discouraged from any form of economic sanctions. Economic sanctions, the next step after that is war. Yeah, we all know this. If you look at like the history of the world, you do economic sanctions, and if they don't work, you do war. If you can't do economic sanctions, and if they're trying to get individuals as well, like there is talk of support for Palestine, waving a Palestine flag now becoming an illegal offence. That's just coming out at the moment. Braverman's talking about it. Suella Braverman, she's mentioning that. So any support for Palestine, any support for like just saying, actually, I'm not going to buy Israeli goods because I don't agree with what they're doing, you could be criminal. What do you mean? I have to buy Israeli goods, do I? Is that what they mean? Councils have to buy from Israel? This is absolutely bizarre. So if you take away the non-violent tools of people to fight oppression, then the logical conclusion is that someone is going to get violent. Now, violence is done to Palestinian people by the state of Israel every day. You are allowed to go into a home of a Palestinian person in Israel, evict them, and move someone in from Brooklyn if they're Jewish. Right? That's a thing. That really is a rule. They have a nation-state law where Jewish people are considered to have more rights than anyone else. So, and if you are a person who believes in secular states, like I'm a person who believes that whether you're Jewish, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Christian, you should be free to have those religions in any country in the world. That's what I feel. I feel every country should be secular. But over the past few years, we've been said, actually, if we say that a Jewish state where people have Jewish people have greater rights than other people, that we are being anti-Semitic. We're being told that. Now, that's not anti-Semitic at all. In fact, it's the opposite of anti-Semitic. It's saying Jewish people are equally as diverse as everyone else and should be able to live and be free and everything like that. And also that Jewish people are diverse of opinion, because many of my Jewish friends that I know are totally against the idea of even there being a state of Israel. So it's controversial within Jewish populations as well as to whether Israel should exist as a state. Yet they would be anti-Semitic for suggesting that. Now I know there's a lot going on there, but that is the build-up to this particular conflict. Now Hamas, who some people are saying are funded by Iran, have gone in and they have fought back in a violent way, and that's what's happening now, and that's what's getting attention. And I think that explains exactly what's wrong in this situation, because all the stuff I've said before, no one ever knows, and I always get asked about this, and I try and explain like 70 years of history that I'm sketchy on, and that's the difficulty. That should be absolutely clear in the news, but it's not. It's a completely one-sided picture again and again, and it's the powerful against the oppressed, and the oppressed story is not being told.
We were talking before the show, and the state of Israel, the Israeli forces in the West Bank have killed 200 Palestinians since the beginning of this year. And it's just gone unnoticed.
They murder the press. They murder children with regularity. You know, this is like they take sniper shots at them.
Headshots. No,
Yeah.
they are not. These are.
Well, these are people who are completely not doing anything as well. They're just wandering along, and they'll be getting sniped in
Next
the
question,
head.
Paul. Corbyn has been pressed to condemn Hamas's actions. Do you condemn Hamas's actions?
So again, this is one of those things. Like Hassan Zomlot was asked this question yesterday, and he's saying, "Why am I, as a Palestinian, always asked to condemn my own people? Why do you never get an Israeli minister on and saying, do you condemn Israel, attacking us, doing an airstrike on Gaza, destroying a hospital, bulldozing a hospital?" They never asked that question. So again, this is one of those things where I think we really need to be careful about what we say, because it's very, very clear. What Corbyn said was he condemns all violence. He's a non-violent man. That should have been enough for anyone, but they want more. They want him to have to go against the people who are fighting on the side that he thinks is oppressed. They want him to say something awful about them. So I'm not gonna, like, you know what? I don't think I need to condemn anything, because I'm a non-violent person, and everyone I know knows that I'm a non-violent person, and I completely condemn all acts of violence. But the situation that has led them to this is not entirely of the Palestinian people's control, and they have been given no choice but to fight back. And the people who would be saying these things to me.
The next question, Paul. The next question was: Starmer has said there's no justification for Hamas's actions. Are you telling me that there are justifications for Hamas's actions?
There's absolutely justification for their action. What choice do they have? So you've got a choice, and you get these people who be like, "Oh, this is terrible," and they'll be like going around saying about how awful this situation is and how terrible what Hamas has done is. Yet those same people, if they were given the choice of lying down and accepting being bombed routinely, having their homes gradually taken away from them, living on a smaller and smaller space, having their bulldozers, having their houses bulldozed, having their hospitals bulldozed, having their food controlled in and out of their area, they would be the first to say, "You've got to fight back, you've got to fight back." Yet they don't see that, because the Palestinians are not given a voice, and in a lot of cases, people don't like the idea of brown people fighting back, because these are Arabs. They're Arab people. So I think some people just don't want to see Arabs fighting back. At the end of the day, Muslims are a religion of peace. And remember, there's Christians in there as well. It's not just Muslims, it's Christians as well. Peaceful religions that are being forced into doing things. Now, if you watched our special on Palestine before, we had people who lived in there. This is not a new thing. They've been put in this awful situation for years on end. And what do? So what's the other choice than to fight back? You're not allowed to do economic sanctions. You're not allowed to do anything through diplomatic channels because you're not recognised as a state. You're not allowed to do a single thing because Israel are very, very powerful. They're a nuclear power. They've got the ear of many a Western democracy because it really suits them to have a power base in the Middle East. So this isn't really to do with ideological. This is strategic. They've got a
Right.
strategic thing
Paul,
in there. So
thank you.
yeah, sorry, I could go on about this forever.
Last question, and in a way, this is leading on from what you just said. Most of the world leaders have said that, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself. They've looked at what Israel's doing in return, and they've said Israel has a right to defend itself. Do you support Israel's response to the attack?
No, but what are they defending themselves from? Like what? Who's the aggressor here? Who's the oppressor? Who's the powerful? This is like having, like, you know, if I'm a teacher in school and I see a child bullied relentlessly by a group of children, hit with sticks, punched and kicked in the head, and then the other kid throws a sweet wrapper back at them, and I condemn them, and I know that's a stupid thing, but like, how can you compare airstrikes with what the power Hamas have? It's not equivalent power. So as much as it's a terrible thing to murder people, and I do think it is murder, I would completely disregard that as a tactic personally. I don't know what choice have they got, and what are Israel defending themselves from? It's a situation they've brought upon themselves by not allowing those people to live in freedom. So and I'm not talking about Israeli people. I'm talking about the Israeli state, the people who control Israel state, the Israeli government, who are going increasingly right-wing. And again, that's been recognised as well. They're a very, very right-wing, ultra-authoritarian government that very recently their own people have been out on the streets protesting against how right-wing they've become. So, as always, ordinary people are the victims, whether they're Palestinians or identify as Israelis or whatever they think they are. It's ordinary people who are going to lose, and rich people are going to gain a lot of money out of this war, and the people who suffer will be ordinary people who were kidnapped, ordinary people who were tortured, ordinary people in a population in Gaza that I think is 17 years old as an average age, which shows you how decimated those people are.
Thank you. Jacqueline Hemming's pointing out, of course, that one of the Israeli tactics has been a full blockade: gas, oil, food, and water, medical supplies. Nothing is going in. 2 million people living in an area the size of Setchfield constituency, and
they control.
No means of
people.
self-support. It's genocide, and they're calling, of course, for nuclear strikes. The Israeli right are calling for a nuclear strike. It is horrific. Kerry, Starmer has said that Hamas's attack was, quote, a deliberate attempt to set back the peace process. Now, what do you think about that statement?
John, I'm going to swear, and I'm sorry. It's an absolute load of bollocks. We all know the Israeli connections with the Labour Party. We've all seen the leaked videos, Labour Party for Israelis and all that and stuff. If you support Palestine, you're deemed as anti-Semitic in the Labour Party. It's just a load of drivel. How any leader of the Labour Party who's supposed to be a humanist, socialist Labour Party can say that is beyond me, and it actually makes me sick. And they're agreeing about what Jacqueline Hemming said in the comments, what you've just read out about no food, no nothing getting put through with the Palestinian. And I think that's just absolutely disgusting. And I think anyone in the Labour Party who supports that drivel is in it for themselves, and they're getting a few backhanders off Israeli people, in my opinion.
Do you think? My feeling about the attack is I'm just the desperation that must have led Hamas to do this, because they must have known that they would never succeed, and they must have known that the result would be devastation of Gaza, all-out attack on Gaza. This was a suicide mission. The question is, can any good come of what Hamas have done? Is it not just, it's not going to have any effect on Israel except to make them worse. They haven't got the support of the world, and now they're getting massacred within this very tightly knit sort of. Can any good come of what Hamas have done?
I think that it's got people talking again. I mean, have you seen like people, although Palestine's a thing 364, 5 days a year, I think that what they've done is very brave. And I have an old saying, even nice, tolerant people have their limits. And I think they've took this opportunity, which they know it's like peeing against the wind, technically. That's my terminology of it. And they've took this opportunity and they've done what they've done in a kind of fight back, and it's got people talking. I mean, we've currently got hundreds of people protesting outside the Israeli embassy in London, and it's think making like people. I mean, I understood Palestine before, well, kind of. I understood about Palestinian people before and stuff like that, but with this week's events, it's actually made me read into it more and think about it more and be more humanistic about it. And I don't think that it's literally as though because this little minority group that have been downtrodden for donkey's years, bearing in mind, didn't Israel only become like a thing in 1940, whatever. I've seen that today as well. They've been downtrodden for years, and this was their chance to fight back. But because of the power in Israel, this little group who are trying to fight for their freedom are deemed as the bad ones, when people seem to have short memories about how many Palestinians and how many Palestinian children have been killed before, and now they're cutting off water, food, and all that. And this government are agreeing with it, and I just think it's bizarre. It's really, really mad. Like, the only way I can describe it, and my mind works a lot different to other people's, as you can gather. But isn't the reason that Putin bombed Ukraine because he wanted that little bit back? And look at what's happened with Ukraine. And I think that's completely different, but that's the way I see it. And I think that the reason that it made me ill, the way that the Israeli flag was like put on a big thing outside the Houses of Parliament. What about the Palestinian people who've been murdered over the last few years and stuff like that? They seem to be forgotten. And I just think that all these politicians were slating the Palestinians, like whatever, they're all in it for themselves because they get the money in, they get the money in, they get the money in. And they're all getting loads of, mostly the Labour Party. That makes sense.
It does. Thank you very much indeed. Kat, just two questions. Let's think about the sort of the impact in England. I mean, Braverman has said that the full force of the law will be used against displays of support for Hamas. Paul has said that there's talk about stopping people waving Palestinian flags. Now, Hamas is a proscribed terrorist organization. But what do you reckon about the thought that you might be arrested if you go on a pro-Gaza demonstration?
I mean, it comes alongside a long litany of things that she has suggested as being offensive to her personal ideology, including saying from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which is something I have shouted for 20 years at protests, and at no such time has that been a murderous wish. That has been a hopeful wish of emancipation and of freedom. So to have a government want to continue to oppress our rights to call out for the freedom and emancipation and the social justice of oppressed people should come as no surprise. But we shouldn't be complacent about that. So we're not on the right side of something. So we have a government who is saying this is right and this is wrong, and these people are okay to be oppressed, and these people are not okay to be oppressed. And it is absolutely perfectly right to be disgusted by that. Don't be normalized by the way that they want to control this narrative. It is perfectly okay to want to say F you. And I don't agree. whether that be in the word Starmer chooses at the Labour conference, or Suella Braverman chooses when she speaks about wanting to support one side versus another of a very complex situation, which has to do with colonialism, with a 70-year history of oppression of a people on a small strip of land being oppressed, not just today, but for 70 years. And nor does that make it right that the people on the other side of that barbed wire are being murdered, but it gives you context and an understanding as to why this horrible, heartbreaking situation happens when people suffer and they're oppressed. They will fight dirty.
I mean, I absolutely agree that basically Palestinians, both in the West Bank, are increasingly being, and certainly in Gaza, are being herded into these open prisons, concentration camps, you would call them in any other situation, and eventually somebody's going to rebel against that, and how people can't understand that leaves me bewildered. Last question to you. Corbyn has said on the internet we need an immediate ceasefire and urgent de-escalation, and we need a route out of the tragic cycle of violence. Now, he's been condemned for saying that, but I think that's ultimately the only answer, the only solution to that. I mean, what do you think? Is Corbyn's statement there the solution, or is it insufficient?
I think if we obsess about a character, we get lost. I think what he said is perfectly reasonable, 100% perfectly reasonable and compassionate, and considering both complex sides of the matter. But in the world we live in which people are cartoonized and obsessed about, it becomes this whole other monster. But if you look at those words on a sheet of paper, aren't they pretty reasonable and pretty sensible? And then we have all of this propaganda, and we have the mainstream media insinuating things into those words, picking a verb here, picking a verb there, and making it sound monstrous. But read those words printed on a sheet of paper without punctuation and without propaganda, and they're pretty effing sensible, in my view.
I'm just going to read out Jane Strange. There's no justification for murdering Israeli civilians, but there's also no justification for the murder of Palestinian civilians. I do understand that the United Nations is looking into the perpetration of war crimes. The Israelis have been using white phosphorus in Gaza, and they've been bombing civilian targets. So that's going to be looked into. This is just the most awful situation, and giving Israel a carte blanche to do what they like is not the answer. Let's move on. Sorry, Kerry, I'm moving on.
All right.
Paul. Now, Kerry, we move on to Sunak's speech. And you thought that Rachel Reeves was like an AI bot, but that was before you watched Sunak. Tell me.
I watched Sunak before Rachel Reeves. She was like my Al, as I call
it. Give us a brief summary of what Sunak said, and then tell us what you thought of his speech.
Well, his opening line was communities. Is Rishi Sunak the richest man in Parliament ever lived in a poverty-stricken community? His wife opening his speech was absolute, complete and utter drivel. And I just think, well, she was more robotic than what he was, to be fair. They were both like this. Honestly, it was just like Jeremy Corbyn still lives in his head rent-free, that's fact, because he mentioned Corbyn in this speech. He continuously blamed the Labour Party. It's as though like he's got like memory loss. Oh, the last 13 years. Excuse me, when you're the Chancellor before you become the PM or the unelected PM, you were the Chancellor. You've been in government for how long? And they're still blaming the Labour Party. And all it was to me, right, and I've watched this twice today, and I don't take things in very well, as everyone knows on this show. All it was to me, right, is like literally like this robotic little man who needs a new pair of trousers. It looks like he's going into Christmas with new school trousers on, like about an inch from his ankle. Like just spreading hate in this country. He went about trans people, small boats, just loads of stuff. And it was as though like he's that desperate now. He needs to pull in the severely right-wing votes back in. Oh, well, the Labour Party, the Labour Party haven't been in government for 13 years. How can you blame them still? Even though I'm not a fan of the Labour Party, they still continuously blame the Labour Party for their own wrongdoings. And he is like a little robot. He's
Okay, I'm going to
causing hate in this country. Look
I'm
at it.
going to throw
Look,
out some things that he
since his
said,
speech,
and
the hate crimes on trans people has gone through the roof.
I'm going to throw out some things that he said and ask you what you thought about those. He's abolished HS2 and he's going to spend the money on other transport projects in the north of England. Now, last week, the guests on this program said HS2 ought to have been abolished. What about that?
Does the North stop at Manchester or Leeds?
It's going to stop at Birmingham.
Don't we exist up here in the northeast? The ones that were always left behind. Are we? To me, like Manchester's not the north. It's like the bit above London. We are the proper north.
Next one. He's going to merge A levels and T levels into one high quality advanced British standard exam at 19.
This absolutely infuriates me as having an autistic son. This absolutely boils my blood. What if your child is not academic?
Well, actually, to be fair, in theory, that is trying to address that. That's like, that technically is good. It's just the problem is there's no meat on the bones. They don't know what they're doing. But that
you have to provide the
like theoretically, I agree with the idea of trying to do parity of esteem of academic and vocational courses. But how is he going to do that? How is he going to ensure that there is parity of esteem? There was nothing on their meat on the bones. It's something a lot of politicians think gets them a few votes. But yeah, there's nothing there. But in theory, that's probably one of the least offensive parts of the speech.
Back to Kelly.
You know what I think they should bring back? Remember, Paul, you're the same age as me, so you'll remember this. Remember the old YTS schemes where you used to get paid £40 a week to go and get trained? When you left school, you could go on a YTS, regardless of your GCSEs, and you came out with a trade. What they need to do is bring that back, in my opinion. Like, my Riley is autistic. He's not academic. I wasn't academic. Where my daughter, who's doing her GCSEs now, she's the brain box. She doesn't get it from me, as you can gather. But she's the brain box. But I think there needs to be more alternative for these non-academic kids.
Right, Kerry, next one. Smoking. He's going to, if you're 14 now, you'll never be allowed to smoke because they're going to advance the age where you're prohibited to keep up with that. What do you reckon to that for an idea?
Absolute bollocks. And I will genuinely say that because I am a smoker. Like, yeah, fair dues. But Rishi Sunak must have been a smoker in his previous life because it stunted his growth.
What about stopping young people getting hold of vapes to the same degree?
I agree with that. To be fair, the vape thing is on another level. Like, I've seen kids today who were 11-year-old with vaping. I caught my 17-year-old with a vape about 2 months ago now, and he might as well have murdered someone the way I went through him like a dose of salt. I was
so
like,
hang on. You would let him smoke?
Oh, no, I wouldn't let him smoke. I'm daft and naive. I started smoking when I was 13 years old. More fool me. And
But
it's an addictive
don't
thing.
you agree, therefore, with Rishi Sunak's thing that he's going to stop people smoking, and that he's going to won't work.
No, because
Last one, Kerry, because
vape,
then I'm going to
the
move on.
vape thing needs stopping. The smoking thing doesn't. Kids don't see smoking as a big thing anymore. Vapes are the big thing. Where if he put a more thing into the vapes and the smoking, he'll win.
Last one, very quickly, because we've run out of time. He's going to go for net zero by 2050, but he's going to do it in a way which doesn't harm motorists. What about that?
Well, I'm a motorist, isn't it? Look at the non in Newcastle city centre now. When is it ULEZ or U Summit in London where people are covering the cameras? But the thing is, though, right, they're not going to achieve that when we've got a shite public transport system. And in the northeast, especially where I'm from, we've got no public transport. Like you go to London, everything's at the drop of your feet. Where you go here, it's after 6 o'clock. It takes me an hour and a half to get a bus anywhere.
Right. Thank you, Kerry.
That's public things.
I'm going to shut you down. By the way, I warned all my guests I'd be like this because we're running out of time. Kat, talking to Kerry, the curate's egg, you've heard of the curate's egg, good in parts. I mean, was Sunak's speech the same? Some good bits, some bad bits? Were there any bits you liked? Were there any bits you hated?
I mean, it was utter poison, and it was very stereotypical propaganda to get headlines to try and pull some votes in. It's very mediocre, and it echoed, a little bit of Thatcher being a pharmacist crap. Nothing of interest to me. Quite bored by it.
Leveling up.
The Lib Dems were they've published things, sort of things he didn't mention: mortgages, energy, cost of living, ambulances, sewage, dentists, pensions, and I can't read. Sleep.
Funny that they didn't mention the right to strike, hey, the Lib Dems. Of course, I had absolutely zero expectation that Sunak would mention things that I care about, because his values don't represent my values. It's that simple, really. And funnily enough, guess what? Starmer doesn't represent my values, and his speech didn't represent anything that represents my values. So there you go.
About what Starmer said next week, it's sort of cringe. Finally, Paul. I mean, was he basically he was trying to polish a turd, wasn't he? I mean, his speech seemed disliked by his own party. There was no Tory bounce. Labour are on for a 198-seat majority in the polls at the moment. How do you think his speech will have rescued the Tories? Is it a platform for a comeback, or was it just a waste of all our time?
Well, speaking of polishing turds, I heard you can't polish a turd, but you can chuck glitter on it, it's just vacuous nonsense, isn't it? It's like nothing that really matters to people. It's playing to the GB News crowd. I just think that it does speak to our system and our politics that the things that he went on were the kind of non-issues that really don't matter, but very, very controversial, trying to twist things around to talk about things that really don't affect very many people's lives, but everyone's talking about. So if you're talking about, very few people are affected by trans issues other than trans people, yet everyone's talking about it. You know what I mean? And I know we're coming on to that next, so I won't go into that too much. That's what he's focusing on. It's like the Top Gear mentality, this car is electric and it's crap, that kind of thing. But actually, there is a point to not have to not have electric cars because there's just not enough lithium kicking around, and we're going to have to absolutely almost enslave people in Africa to get it out of the ground. So there's there are arguments about this, and going back to Curry's public transport, yeah, that's a way to address climate change. Forget about cars. You know, if people want to buy cars, then live your life, buy cars, but make it really, really easy not to use them, and use them. Like I see people out when I'm out on my bikes, and they'll be driving like a 1960s lovely car out in the moors, having a nice time, and you think that's kind of nice, that. But if someone's like driving a Tory tractor in the middle of London, running over cyclists and things like that, oh, that's Keir Starmer as well, isn't it? Oh, I keep forgetting. So yeah, but if they're doing things like that, using gas guzzlers in the middle of town when it's pointless and it doesn't get you anywhere quickly, that's what we need to do. We just need to make things easier for people and cheap for people, so that they make those choices and then say, yeah, I do want to go for a drive in a nice car, but it's not going to be a very often thing. It's going to be a luxury because I love doing that kind of thing and cleaning it and all that stuff, and people still have the freedom to do whatever they want. But they're saying, oh no, they're trying to take these cars away from me. Who's they? You. It's literally you. Your government have said these things. Honestly, it's an absolute joke.
I mean, since I got my free bus pass, I go everywhere by bus now. I don't use my car at all. That's the answer. Let everybody go on buses free.
And John, that's a discussion for another time, because in London we have a thing called the Freedom Pass for people who are over 60. And actually, there's a massive debate to be had about people having free travel at the point of access, not just people over 60. That I think there's,
I agree.
I think there's genuine room to that, because what you give to people is people getting to school, to college, serving their mental health. There's, yeah, and a huge other debate for another time, but let's have it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. Last question, and it is to you, Kat. It's about trans hate, and yes, Rishi Sunak with that stupid statement, which I just don't agree with at all, sort of drew attention. But there's been a Home Office report just come out about a massive increase in trans hate. And last year, the report, which had actually flagged a slight decrease in trans hate, flagged social media as the prime mover. This year, the Home Office report is flagging politicians' statements as a prime mover in trans hate. I mean, talk about this to us. And
fucking heartbreaking, isn't it, John?
The cause of what's going on. Talk to me about it.
It's our fundamental responsibility to give a shit about other people. So if other people are going to talk hate without base, without context, and with just sheer politics and judgment, it's our job as human beings to ignore all of that shit and to stand in love with our friends, with our brothers and sisters, non-binary or otherwise, and to love them fearlessly, irregardless. What is most important is that.
The Independent was good on this, and what it said is that whereas 50% of the population in 2019 were pro-trans rights, that's now fallen to 30% of the population being in favour of that. And I agree with you. I personally, it's not my right to comment on one's decision. What gender you are, none of my bloody business. But why has society moved away from supporting trans rights? What's happened?
But I suspect, as with anything that proves a use in a political narrative, uselessly or otherwise, is that trans people have become this enigma that draw a huge amount of very ignorant opinions and are amplified and used on platforms by people who should know better. This doesn't make it right. It makes it even more horrific. But this particular cause has been platformed by people who don't care about the consequences. And the most important reaction is fierce, unwavering love.
I agree with you, and sort of these people are getting kicked, and we have to stand up and shout stop at the bullies. It's as simple.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the people shouting opinions on this matter don't actually care about it, but they believe it will get them attention. But actually, the consequence of what they are saying has huge, very realistic consequences to human beings.
Yeah. Paul, what always shocks me is how vicious the opposition to trans people is. I mean, why is it so vicious?
Because it's been used once again as a political football pit. So if you kind of get people concentrating on something that's really, like, as I mentioned earlier on, to the vast majority of people, trans issues don't really affect them in the slightest. But then if you can say, well, I'm going to use this one example of where this one trans person did that, and I'm going to say, well, that's all trans people do that. It's nonsense. It's like people go kind of both ways. They're like, oh, all trans people are perfect, or all trans people are evil. And the fact is, they're just normal people who will have the normal spectrum of niceness and not niceness, and criminality and not criminality, and all those things. And people try to lump them all together when they're a diverse group of people as well, who happen to not be comfortable in the gender that they were assigned at birth. Now, if you have that alongside the kind of Daily Mail rhetoric of it being a bit titillating as well, and people being obsessed with genitalia, like, I think it's a bunch of pervs having a massive problem over and thinking about people's genitals all the time. Like, I rarely think about anyone else's genitals. It's not really a thing that comes up on a day-to-day basis, yet they're obsessed. And why are all our politicians being asked the question, do women have a penis? It's like, shut up, man. Stop talking about penises on live telly. Just grow up. That would be my response there. But none of them dare say that. It's embarrassing. It's childish and stupid. People's genitals when they change gender or whatever because they need to have their gender reaffirmed, that's up to them. Dear me, I'm never gonna be involved in that decision. Just leave people alone. It's so weird. So that, I think that's a massive part of the problem. But because it's so, I would talk to my mum about it, and she might say, I just don't understand. It's really confusing. I always say, imagine how they must feel being in the wrong body. And it is confusing. It is. It's because we're told to identify as male, female, and the truth is,
Terry, how can sorry, Kat's answer is just say no, just support these people. But what kind of sort of changes would you wish to see to bring about a reduction in trans hate?
Well, gender is a social construct generally, isn't it? It's not. It's a social construct, and I think that I've actually been called transphobic by a male who identifies as a male, a man, or whatever like that. And I got called transphobic because I refused to say I chest fed instead of breastfed my children. And I've been deemed as transphobic for that. And I think that you're getting a lot of these middle aged, misogynistic men who were causing hate towards trans people because they don't have. A trans person wouldn't say, oh, I'm transphobic because I refuse to say I chest fed my children. And said they just want to be loved and welcomed into society. And I think that there's this like a group of moron, small-minded men who are like not John, Paul's thing, are obsessed with genitalia. I think they've got the issues, not trans people, but I think they cause issues for trans people.
Thank
if
you,
you get what I mean.
Yeah. Very quickly, Kat.
I hope that didn't sound bad.
Do you fear? No, thank you, Kerry. You're always very honest, and that was smashing. Thank you, Kat. Just very briefly in our last minute of the show, do you fear the Tories running a culture war on this and other similar things in the run-up to the election? How, is this something we need to worry
Yes,
about?
I 100% do, and I 100% if they believe that if they continue in their rhetoric, people will die out of the consequence of their propaganda, and we should be really realistic and honest about that.
Yeah, totally agree.
I mean, I think it's alarming. It's deeply alarming. And that brings the show to a halt on time. Come on, admit it. I was pretty damn good tonight. Sort of.
Now, ain't you?
Had 3 people who it's virtually impossible to stop talking. And I managed.
Hey, you, John.
And
You're
here we are.
the worst.
Paul Daly, just bring us to a close with your normal little spiel. And I will say thank you, Kerry. You're always a joy to listen to. Thank you. Kat, thank you for stepping in at such short notice. And you're so measured and wise. It's wonderful. And Paul.
Not always.
Paul said yes, always. And Paul always knows everything about everything. So Paul, close us down.
We live in some really, really worrying times at the moment, and I think they're becoming increasingly hopeless. And by hopeless, I mean devoid of hope in many areas. One of the places I find my hope is in the people who are involved with Socialist Think Tank, because I think there's been a successful strategy of dividing the left on all sorts of issues, whether that's trans issues, whether that's whether that's Israel, Palestine, whether that's any of these things that get us talking and not agreeing with one another. It's really nice to have people who just look at it and say, you know what, people deserve to be treated with respect. We need to have a society that looks after everyone, not just a few at the top. We need to hear both sides of a story. We need to respect one another. We need to listen to one another. It's and it's a really refreshing place to be. So I'm kind of a bit tired of people labeling one another when, I know people on the right who will label the left as being a thing and they're actually talking about liberals. And I know people on the left who sometimes label people on the right and they're actually talking about liberals. Maybe we just need to get rid of the liberals. But maybe that's the key thing, and then the left and right can argue with each other properly. But as it stands, we've got a completely controlled by massive power corporate media that will tell us things that really are not true. They'll tell us one side of the story. Truth's in the eye, like in the ear of the beholder, I guess. But if you're only told one side of the story, then you're going to really struggle. That's what Socialist Think Tank's about. We try to provide a voice to those people who don't have a voice. We are limited in our number of people who listen, but let's hope we're extremely influential. You are lovely people who listen in and write in and all those things. It's been lovely to see those names because I miss a lot of people. So I've been really busy doing health and fitness things and trying to do world championships and stuff. So yeah, it's really nice to be back. Get involved with Socialist Think Tank if you can. You can do that on our website. Make sure you've subscribed to all our social media channels, especially YouTube. Let's get to over 1,000 subscribers. Tell your friends, and then I suppose that gives us a better chance of reaching a wider audience once those key targets are hit. So let's set a target that by December we're going to have 1,000 subscribers on YouTube. We're already in the 700s. So let's do that. Yeah, let's do a big push. That's what I'm going to ask for. Make our Christmas for us and help us spread the message out there. Thank you so much. You did the thank yous to everyone else, but John, you're absolutely incredible. And it's been really nice spending this time with you tonight. And we will see you all very, very, very soon. Take care, everyone.
Keep the red flag flying there.